What's going on YouTube? It's Garrett coming at you with another video. Today, as you can tell by the title, I'm here to talk about the reasons why I can never go back to teaching ESL in a Japanese public school. Generally speaking, I can put it down to three particular reasons why. Before I even begin, I just want to set a disclaimer. By no means am I bashing or am I trying to put down this profession in particular. If you are by any chance about to begin, by no means am I trying to kill your vibe. If this is something you've been doing for decades long, this is not a knock on you. This is strictly and purely my own individual opinion coming from my own experience. A lot of the things that I say you could probably find on other blogs, you could probably find on other YouTube videos similarly. And also I just wanted to put out, I taught English in Japan for about 2 years. The first year I can confidently say I loved it. Like, I really loved it. I enjoyed teaching, especially students and working with kids. All these variables considered, I think today we can go into this video with a fairly balanced perspective. Let's get started. And so again, for those who are unfamiliar, but in order to teach English in Japan, generally you work as an ALT or an assistant language teacher. I went into full detail in another video about some tips I provide for first-time ALTs if you want to check that out, if you're planning on coming over. You're an assistant teacher to a Japanese teacher in a public school, and maybe you'll work in a variety of different schools. Maybe you'll work at one, maybe you'll work in a junior high school, kindergarten, elementary, high school, so on and so forth. And yeah, you don't have to know any Japanese for this. And the way that you can go about it is either you get hired by a dispatch company, somewhere like a JET program or Interact, and they're a third party which sort of drafts your labor laws and puts you into a contract assembled with the Board of Education and is the middleman between you and the Japanese school system. Or you go the second route, which is you are a direct hire, which means that the Board of Education in Japan has directly hired you to work for them, and they draft your contract for you. Either which way, when you say you're going to teach English in Japan, generally that's the trajectory route most folks take. And so my first reason today why I can never go back to teaching ESL in a Japanese public school is, personally, when I look for a career, there's two criteria that I'm kind of looking for. Either it's going to be something which I am able to grow and work up. If not growth, I expect to see some stability. You know, so long as I'm meeting the quality performance checks, I shouldn't have to worry about not having a job. But when it comes to an ALT position, you got to understand how the Japanese school system works. So basically, for those of you who don't know, the public school system in Japan is based off of the heavy influence of Buddhism, as are many parts of Japanese culture and society. Specifically, what I'm talking about is the teachers who teach, and not even just the teachers, even the principals. Whoever works in the school can only work there for, I think, about like 5 years maximum. No matter who you are and no matter what your position is, no matter how well of a job you did, you're not allowed to sit at that school for over around that 5-year mark. After 5 years, the teachers get rotated into another school in a district, usually in the prefecture. That's generally the system which stems from Buddhism. Monks have to do that historically with each temple that they study and teach at in order to sort of preserve and keep within the tradition a sense of humility, a sense that you can't always be comfortable at one place. And for me personally, that's actually a point that I truly admire about the Japanese schools. Because I know, coming from America, that god-awful teacher who's been at that school for 20 years and he or she is just, they're not great, but they're protected by that secure 10-year barrier that they're able to put up. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I thought was really cool about Japan at first. Why is that important? So as a foreigner working in this education system, you still abide by this general philosophy. However, because you're a foreigner, there are still unwritten labor laws. This position in general is not really created in order for someone to advance their career path. The ALT is what I mean. So for an example, let's pull the JET program, right? Perfect example. JET program, you get a contract for about 3 years maximum. Some folks got like 5 years. Once you're done with those 3 to 5 years, you've earned yourself your plane ticket back home to America. And now there's a lot of folks who are thinking like, well, wait a minute, what if I don't want to fly back to my home country, right? And that is where a lot of people get stuck, which is they've worked for about 5 years or something, 3 years with this one contract. They love their school. They love working with these people, these students. They've gotten used to the lifestyle. They've mastered their craft at team teaching, and they want to do this forever. But just because of the way of the Japanese educational philosophy, mixed with the fact that there aren't written foreign labor laws that sort of help integrate the foreigners into this working society. And let's not forget, most ALTs don't have a Japanese teaching license, so it doesn't really make sense for them to be properly assimilated to the same degree as the Japanese teachers. That's where things can get a little bit tricky. Once you're done with your contract for like a JET program, you're just expected to return home as sort of like, thank you for exposing your culture and sharing your culture with Japan. Now we're going to bring a new young perspective, and they'll go through the same cycle again. And I find that crazy, like, because then that means they have to retrain someone, has no idea what they're doing. And although it's great because it like provides a new fresh opportunity for more people to come to Japan and whatnot, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that if there's someone who's willing to stay in the system and who's doing such a great job, like that, it means that they're subtracted from the equation altogether. Well, what about the direct hires, right? What about the folks who got directly hired by their Board of Educations and there is no dispatch company and the Board of Education is the one who drafts their ALT contract? I've also worked with a handful of these folks, and they struggle in their own ways in the sense that once your 5 years are up, unlike the other Japanese teachers, it's not like you get an automatic transfer and you start a new contract in a new district or something. You have to fire up your resume all over again, look for a new Board of Education, go through different job interviews, and continue this repetitive hustle of restarting again and again and again every single 5 years. You're kind of hoping for the good grace of your Board of Education that after the 5 years, if you've done a really good job, then maybe they'll put in a good word for you. Maybe they know someone and it's an easy transfer to somewhere else. But I've also heard folks who said it wasn't the case. And once they were done with their contract, it was like they were struggling to find a new job. Personally, when I start actually buckling in and having my own family and kids, I'd hope that I'd be able to support them with a career which has a little bit more security and stability. And so my next point, I feel like the older that I get and the more experiences I take in, the less tolerant I become to misgivings. And in this job, there's going to be a lot of times where, as I said before, since you're the assistant, you just have to play the yes man game, where you have to turn a blind eye to a lot of things because you're simply just there to assisting. Like when I compare myself to the first year when I came to Japan to now, like it was such a fresh new experience for me. I was willing to just nod my head and adapt because I was trying to learn the culture in general. But like today, I think there were a lot of things that happened in that first year which I wouldn't be allowed to just turn a blind eye on. I was still at the whim of very much what is just the Japanese system in general, which is, of course, depending on the rankings and depending on the hierarchy, like you don't question people. You just, if they give you a command, you're just supposed to say yes, you know? But that's why I'm saying it's more or less a job for someone who's willing to just simply nod their head and go with the flow. Those are the people who generally have the least sense of resistance and who generally are able to keep their sanity in check. And it can also be a pretty physically demanding job. You know, I'm thinking back 3 years ago when I was first teaching, and sometimes you're teaching a full day of classes. Some folks, they're teaching not just a full day of classes at one school, but at various schools around the area, commuting on bikes or whatever across town, jumping into another school and then immediately going into your class. My workload was actually pretty heavy because I had one of the biggest schools in my area. I taught like about 5 classes, sometimes even, I remember for a while they were putting 6 periods on me just because we had such a huge school, and it can get pretty exhausting. Like, you have to have a lot of energy when it comes to working with kids. Especially then, maybe I was able to jump around, dance like a monkey, you know, I was a lot more nimble, I could say, and I had a lot more energy, and I was willing to do a lot of those things and put on a good act. Nowadays, it would be a lot more difficult. I'll say that. And the kids need somebody who's going to be full of life and energy. And that's why, for the longevity and sustainability of this job, the older I get, the more difficult I find it would be to try to keep up that same spirit. That's just personally my thought. Last but not least is, I feel like the English language curriculum is lacking severely. What I mean by that is the Japanese government, Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology, aka MEXT. They're kind of the ones who call the shots on the curriculum, and they set the standards, especially when it comes to their high school entrance exams. And these high school entrance exams, they're so important, kind of similar to America in the sense of college. I think the high schools are about held to that degree of importance in education. So if you don't get into a good high school, it's difficult to get into a good college. If you don't get into a good college, so on and so forth. And it all starts from these entrance exams, which are implemented by MEXT. And so MEXT has decided in the past couple decades to throw English as a mandatory subject in these entrance exams. However, the English itself that's being presented is generally very grammar oriented. It doesn't necessarily gauge someone by their ability to test someone's English fluency. These exams are based off of textbooks, and the government has their own agreements cut out with these big textbook distributors. And it was the same in America, honestly, with the Common Core. You know, when it comes to education in general, I think it can get very political. I don't know if there's any perfect education system in the world. However, what I can definitely say about the English language implementation in Japanese public schools is it's not properly scaffolded and it's not working. If you look at the statistics, you can see that out of all the countries in the world, basically, who are learning English, Japan falls as like the lowest in terms of successful fluency. It was a little bit disheartening for me to have to continue doing this role and realizing that my job there wasn't necessarily to teach English anymore, because I would find my peace was not through teaching the kids these weird grammatical structures in English that even I wasn't using in my natural language, but I would find my peace just by simply helping students find a new perspective and looking at the world. I realized the system was already set up for failure when, you know, I taught at a junior high school, and there's the first years, the second years, and the third years. And even though there was a student who had a father who spoke English and she spoke English at home, you know, as her second language, the schools don't differentiate based on levels. So because she was a first year, even though she spoke like fluent English, she still had to take the same English class as all the other first years and learn the basic introduction of like, hi, my name is, I like cats. Well, even though there was a third year who still probably couldn't do a basic introduction like that, like even though he slept through all his English classes throughout his whole entire junior high school, he was still expected to be held to the standard of giving a political debate whether or not gay marriage should be legalized in Japan. He was supposed to do that in English. It might even be difficult for some of these kids to debate these topics in Japanese. In order for me to ever even reconsider to think about going back to this job, I would have to hear that they went through major changes in terms of the English curriculum and how they were planning on implementing it. If not the other two, this may be one of the main reasons why I couldn't continue doing this. It just didn't feel like I was doing the job that I was supposed to be doing. And so that's the end of today's video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around. Again, this is not a knock on anyone's profession, and if you're planning on coming over to teach English in Japan, that's awesome. I had a great time while I was doing it for what it was. But in terms of if you're planning on making it as your own career profession or thinking that you'd want to teach English in Japan in the long term and you haven't jumped on that plane yet, it's not meant to deter you. However, please keep these things in mind just to make sure that you have a plan. That's all. And hopefully this will help you mentally prepare for what is the reality to come. And if you find that you love it and you're having a great time and you'd like to make this your career, it's not impossible. Again, I've seen folks do it and they've made it one way or another. However, it's not going to be easy. So personally for myself, I know that this is not something that I would be able to continue for a long time. You know, hey, more power to you if you can. So that's all for today's video. Thanks for checking it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll share some more educational experiences from my time in Japan with you in the future. Peace.